teachers for your prompt timeliness. For those that don't know me, I am Mrs. Bennett. I'm your assistant principal for academics, and I wanted the opportunity to I'm actually speaking to the entire student body this week in small groups about some really important information that affects you as learners, which is why I'm presenting. And it was important for me that you heard from me and from your teachers, and not just your teachers, okay? So today we're going to talk about feedback, and specifically the Schoology gradebook, and we have some new upgrades this year that I want to talk through about what it's going to look like for you as a student and why this is actually going to be really helpful for your learning, okay? So we're going to do a high-level overview today, and then once you start to get grades in your gradebook, your teachers will be able to talk through it more specifically with you. And we're going to be about half an hour is the goal, okay? And if there's time for questions at the end, then I'm happy to answer those. So really this session's about you and you as a learner. It's really important to me and your teachers that at any point in your course that you're taking, you can answer 3 questions. Where am I currently as a learner? Where do I need to go? And basically, what do I need to do to get there? Okay? And I'm very much aware that the last gradebook that we used didn't always allow you to answer those 3 questions. Where am I? Where do I need to go? And how am I going to get there? And so this new version of the gradebook, I hope, will be more helpful to kind of help you on this journey with whatever course you're in. So ultimately, this session's about how you are going to get feedback this year and how that will help you. So some of you know this, some of you don't. We've actually been piloting this new version of the gradebook for 3 years. How many of you here were part of the pilot at any point in the last 3 years? Okay, great. And that feedback that I've been getting from you through your teachers over the last 3 years has been really important because we're finally at a point where we feel we can launch the new gradebook based on the feedback we have received. Okay, so that's why we're choosing to launch it this year. That feedback along the way was really important. These are the 4 courses that did the pilot. The student feedback was very positive overall. I have sent your parents, or I will send your parents, a video today in the weekly newsletter that talks through some of you that had been through this and who were interviewed. Basically, what we heard as teachers overall is that the new gradebook was much more helpful in that it allowed you to be more focused and you knew what to focus on. So you would know your strengths, but you'd also see those areas for growth, and you could actually focus on the areas for growth as a way to improve your learning and ultimately your grade. Okay? So I wanted to share that because if it wasn't good for kids, we wouldn't make these changes. We wouldn't use a new gradebook. It's still Schoology, so we're not changing any platforms. I think one of the bigger changes, if you haven't been through the pilot, is how you are receiving feedback. Okay? So if you're new to the school, or if you haven't been in the pilot, you're probably used to receiving feedback through words, through comments, but also either through, most likely, a letter grade. We're still keeping letter grades. I'm not going to panic anyone in this room, okay? But on the day-to-day assignments, we're not going to use letter grades anymore. We're only going to use these 4 words. This is a proficiency scale that is being used from R1 all the way up through grade 12, okay? And so our goal as teachers is to get everyone to exhibiting. So that is your goal this year, is minimum exhibiting. If you can get to exhibiting depth, and many of you will, because you will have every opportunity, fantastic, okay? But I share that because on assessments, if you are getting emerging and developing, we're going to be working with you to get to exhibiting. What is exhibiting on a report card? Is a B+. So my minimum expectation is that everyone in this room gets to a B+. Wow, wouldn't that be amazing? If we could all minimally get to a B+, all right? So that's what your teachers, now, will all of you get there in the year? Maybe, maybe not, but the goal is we get there, okay? And of course, it's how hard are you gonna work to make sure that you can get there. So you're gonna see these words this year in your grade book and on your assignments. And when you get an assignment this year, you're not just gonna see like 1 exhibiting. You might see 5 you got 5 exhibitings, or maybe you got 3 exhibitings and 2 exhibiting depths, because your assessments are going to be broken down now into skills, different skills. So when you write an essay in English, you won't just get an A, you might see a score for how well you developed a thesis, how well you organized your paper, how detailed your thoughts were. So you can start to see now that you're getting more information as you go along. Okay? So a kind of a change for this year is you're going to hear your teachers talking a lot about evidence of learning. Everything you do for your teacher, every assignment, formative or summative, is evidence of learning. It all matters. Because if James is sitting here and at the end of the year, if I want to see how well he can write a thesis, I have to look at all of the evidence of learning over time to see how well he did. And if he can do it now, do I care about the before? No. If he can do it now, if he can drive, and he's going to get his license, I don't care that he failed 5 times before. Okay? So we're going to look at the evidence over time. Well, I might care if you're using my car. And I share that for this reason. You will still hear the language of formative and summative. We know what that means, right? Summative seems to be this bigger assignments where you get lots of feedback and you had a grade attached. Formative, I would often hear students say, I don't need to do the formative, it doesn't count. Okay? That's no longer the case. So your teachers, when you do formatives this year, your teachers will be telling you, this is a little quick formative check-in that doesn't count in the grade book, but I want to know what you can do, okay? But we're also going to have formatives along the year that count towards your final grade. And oftentimes, especially in English, those formatives will most likely be the process work along the way. So if you're doing a huge research at the end, your teacher might want to check in here. I'm now going to check your annotated bibliography. It's a formative that counts. Now I want to check your outline. It's a formative that counts. I now want to check a rough draft. It's a formative that counts. Why are we doing that? If I want to see where you are at the end of the year, I need lots of evidence in the grade book to look at trends, to see how you're doing. If you couldn't do it before, it's okay. What matters is if we can do it now. Does that make sense? Okay, if we only count summatives, you might have only 2 or 3 pieces of evidence in a grade book in a semester, and that's not enough evidence to look at trends over time. So you can't use anymore, Mrs. Bennett, formatives don't count, I don't have to do them. They do. Do your homework. Okay. So, let's leave the questions right to the end, is that okay? So in their grade book this year, now we don't have data in it yet, but I wanted to bring you aware to a few vocabulary pieces that you're going to see, okay? In your grade book, you're going to see reporting categories. So for every course, you're going to have anywhere from 2 to 5 reporting categories. These are big buckets of skills or content that the course demands that you know. So the example I have here is for science. In science, we have modeling, investigating, and communicating. Every assessment you do will be assessing your ability to model, or investigate, or communicate, or all 3. And you will start to get scores under each of those buckets. So you'll start to see data trends over time of how you are as a modeler. Data over time as to how well you investigate. Data over time as to how well you communicate. Now, you can start to see how this might be powerful, because if Liam, for instance, is doing a reassessment at the end of the year, he might go, oh, I don't need to study everything in science. My modeling and my investigating are really good. What I may be weaker at is my communicating. So now he's going to a science teacher and saying, I want to work on my communicating. And the teacher then can work with you on that. So you can increase your communication score, okay? So it actually makes studying easier for you as a student because you know what to focus on. In English, the categories are reading, writing, and language use. So you'll have 3 scores in there as well, okay? So you'll have these proficiency scores that the grade book will start to calculate over time. So you might see in your modeling, you're exhibiting depth. Fantastic. You don't have to work on that. You got to keep working. I mean, you got to keep doing your assignments. But you might see investigating is emerging. I got to work on my investigating. Okay? You'll also see in the grade book the second bullet is a measurement topic, which means under each reporting category, you will have a series of more specific skills. So for example, in English, if in the category of reading, it might say your ability to see nuance, or my ability to decode. I don't know what they are. All right? And you'll also be able in the grade book to see how well you're doing on each of those. So now, Liam isn't just focusing on communication, he can dig a little bit deeper and go, oh, this is the part of communication that I need to focus on. So it's kind of a micro look at where you are as a learner, okay? So I'll show you what this looks like in the grade book, so you can start to see. So if you remember when you log into Schoology, if you're new, this is new, but all of the rest of you, is you have your Schoology gradebook, and there's still going to be the option to go into the traditional gradebook, which says grades, but there's also going to be a button called Mastery. And Mastery is where you go to see your detailed feedback. How am I in this reporting category? How am I in this measurement topic? Okay, so when you log in, for example, into Mastery, this is a screen that shows how you're doing on a specific reporting category. So you will see the reporting category up here, right here, writing, language, and technology, if that's your course. And you will see along the side how you're doing, what is your overall proficiency. Okay, so you can see your reporting categories on the left, and how you're scoring on the right. This is a great flash view of where are my strengths, where are my weaknesses. But you can dig a level further, and you can pick a reporting category, and we'll tell you, here's one skill within this reporting category, analyzing claims of evidence. How am I doing? And it gives you a little indicator at the top. The student is developing. So you might go, oh, this is an area that I actually need to focus on. You can actually see all of your assignments that you've done as well. And you can dig into those and go, how did I do on each assignment? And you can see the comments that your teacher gave you. So you can imagine that as we get more data and more assignments in the grade book, this becomes quite rich in data that you can look at. It's not just sitting there saying 14 out of 15, which I know the old book did, or A, what does that mean? B, what does that mean? Okay, so you can do some digging here. We're also asking teachers to make sure that there are narrative comments for you, either in Schoology or on your assignments, okay, for at least summative assessments. And what we've asked teachers to do is, as you're thinking about the feedback you want to give students, we want the teachers to be thinking about where was an area of strength for you. I want all of you to know what you did well. 2, what might you need to grow in? Okay, so that's kind of like, okay, I need to focus on this. And then next steps, what do you need to do to work on that area for growth? Okay, so when I come into a class and ask you about your most recent summative assessment, I might say, what were you good at? What went well? What did your teacher say was an area for growth? And what are your next steps? If you can't answer these questions, I actually don't think you can be an effective student, because you don't know what to work on, right? You have to have a roadmap to be able to get you to the highest level of proficiency. Remember, we're all aiming for exhibiting, and I hope many of you and all of you will get to the highest level of exhibiting depth, okay? So just to kind of pause for a moment and to be thinking about how does this differ from last year, okay? A lot of it's the same. Last year, if you look at the blue zone, you would get a semester 1 report card, right? And on that report card was what? All of your courses, and besides your courses, you had a letter grade, okay? And then in semester 2, you would get another report card, which ultimately gave you the yellow zone, a final letter grade for year-long classes. If they were semester, then each report card was a final grade. That still is the same, okay? But in addition to that, in the red zone, on your semester 1 report card, you will see English. You will see the reporting categories, reading, writing, language use. You will see your overall proficiency for each category, developing, emerging, exhibiting, or exhibiting depth. and you will see a letter grade. Okay, so letter grades aren't going away. We know those are important for your transcript, but it's a much more detailed report card. So the question you might be thinking is, Mrs. Bennett, how do we go from proficiencies to a letter grade? Like, what does that look like? Okay, your teachers have nothing to do with that translation. So your teachers are only communicating in proficiency words. So if you say to Miss Wheatley, am I an A student? Her response will be, well, in reading, you're actually exhibiting depth, and that's the highest level I could ever expect of you. In your writing, you're exhibiting. You're exactly where I should be, and here's the next steps if you want to be exhibiting depth. And in your language use, you're developing. We absolutely need to focus on that. That will be her response, okay? The school will give you the letter grade. So, you can't read this for a reason, but we have a lovely rainbow chart that we have created and used 3 years of data to make sure that this is correct. When I say correct, meaning the grade you would have got last year should be the grade you got this year. In fact, many students will have higher grades this year because the feedback is so much better, and you'll know what to focus on. But at any time, and I will put this crazy rainbow chart in your Schoology resources, at any time, if you want to know what your letter grade is and where you're sitting, you can know. Your teachers will help you figure out how to use the chart. But basically, there's combinations of, if I have 3 reporting categories, you go to the 3 reporting category column, and you look at what your proficiencies are. So at any time, you know your letter grade. Now, keep in mind, if we're looking at where you are at the end of the year and not punishing you for the beginning of the year, the letter grade that you will see will probably be lower than where you'll actually be by the end. Okay? Because we're looking for improvements and honoring improvements. But what I want you to pay attention to, if you want a B+, you have to be exhibiting in all reporting categories. Okay? So that's kind of the minimum, like you know. If you want to be an A or A- student on your transcript, then you have to have a combination of exhibiting and exhibiting depths. And if you have anything in developing or emerging, you will have a B grade or lower. Okay? Again, we run 3 years of data through this rainbow chart. We feel it's consistent with the grades that you would have got in the past. In many cases, they were higher because students could focus on their growth. Okay? So, one last thing, and then I'll open it up for questions. A big part of growing is being able to try again, right? So if James took his driver's test in the States this summer and failed, and then he had to pay another $200 and take it again and failed, and then he paid another $200 and passed, does the driver's place care that you failed 2 times before? No, they don't, but they have your money. But they give you your drivers. You don't get a driver's license that says, warning, James failed 2 times before, right? You got it. And we want the same with learning, is there's gonna be opportunities to try again in some cases. And the trying again is what we're looking at, okay? So a few things about reassessment that are really important. In some of your classes, like English, the skills are recursive. You practice the same things all year. So if you don't do well on your first summative, it's most likely Miss Grant will say, no worries, this is what I want you to focus on, this is what I want you to study and practice, and when we write the next paper, that is your opportunity for reassessment. And then I can go back, and these earlier learning, I'm kind of like, what's the word? I'm not so concerned about it because you've grown. Okay, so reassessment in skill-based courses is built into the course. Now, Miss Grant may say, if you totally blew something, she may say to someone in the room, I actually want you to rewrite that. I want you to rework that because I actually think you know more than what you showed me. So teachers can ask for reassessment to individual students. They might ask a whole class. Okay, so it's really up to the teacher on that part. Any student, okay, I'm going to pause there. The other piece is some of your courses like math. You study something and you never see it again, right? It's not recursive. It doesn't build throughout the course. If it's a course like that, a teacher must give an opportunity for reassessment after that assessment, within the next 8-day cycle. Okay, and I know that wasn't consistent before. So if there's a unit in geometry, I'd say science, photosynthesis, and Mr. Best says we will never study photosynthesis again this year, we can reassess. Anyone that does not get an exhibiting can reassess. That is different from some courses, okay? If you don't get an any student that doesn't get an exhibiting depth can reassess. So every student in the room has the opportunity to get to the highest level. So no more rules around, well, if you got a B, you cannot. Everyone can, okay? But there's some rules around reassessment that are really important. You get one opportunity, not 4 or 5. It has to happen within the next 8-day cycle. I don't want students to get behind. Now, if your teacher says, I'm going to give you an extension because you still need to study more, fine. But they're going to expect that the reassessment happens within the next 8-day cycle. And here's your ticket for reassessment. All your formatives must be done. If you're not going to practice, then I don't expect you to do well on the summative over here. So you need to do your practice so you can give your best effort over here. So if you're someone that never does formatives, you don't have that opportunity to reassess. So your teachers will keep on you for this, okay? You must also write your assessment on the day it was planned. So no more skipping classes because you don't want to write a test, okay? If you're legitimately sick, it happens, fine. Your teacher will find another day, okay? But we're expecting you to be in class on the day that you have assessments. This year, if we see patterns of students missing class when they have assessments, it's a conversation with you and your counselor and your parents, okay? So 1 time, okay, 2 times, we're wondering, 3 times, something's up, okay? So it's really important that if you can't be here for a summative in-class test, you are communicating with your teacher and letting them know that you are sick, okay? With reassessment as well, I imagine your teacher's going to give you some activities for learning. There's no point taking a reassessment if you haven't restudied or repracticed. So there is some work involved in that, okay? And then you reassess, and we just put that data in the grade book. It's another data point. I hope all of you will do better. And that's what we want. This old data, we don't worry about. What if I do worse, Mrs. Bennett? Well, I wonder why anyone would do worse on a reassessment because you've studied and practiced. If that happens, it's a conversation with your teacher. What happened there, right? And you and your teacher can figure out what you want to do with that. Okay? All right, I'm just going to pause there because that's a lot. What questions are you thinking about? Yes?
For the formatives that go into your grade book, usually for summatives, we're given like a 1-week notice. Is the same thing done for formatives?
Yeah, so for summatives, this is what the next slide said. There's lots of actually policies around learning that I would really encourage you to look in the handbook, or even better in your course outlines this year. There's a link to all of the policies that are most important to you as a learner. So for a summative, the teacher has to put it in at least 3 classes before you actually take it. So we did talk about this at our faculty meeting. We had said that yes, there should be warning, but if it's a small thing, then I don't know that it's always possible. So we've left it with teachers that summatives must be in the grade book at least 3 classes before. Formatives are really up to the teacher, but there should never be a surprise formative for students. We don't do pop quizzes. It's not what we do here. That any formative that counts is something that you've been working on. You know it's coming, and it's an opportunity to get some feedback. Okay? It's a good question. Yeah?
Are you allowed to reassess formatives?
Can you reassess formatives? That's a great question. I think it's really the conversation with the teacher. So it depends, like if it's part of your process work, you might not need to because your teacher's gonna reassess that at the end. If it's something more concrete, then maybe, I think that's a great question. We actually didn't talk about that as a faculty. The point is we want you as students to have as much evidence as possible to show where you're going to be, okay? Again, reassessment, the ticket in is all your formatives are done, so that's important as well. Sarah.
One thing I would add to that is that there's an assumption that the formative work that you're doing is going to be reassessed by the summative work. So like Mrs. Bennett said, you can have a conversation with your teacher about that. There's an expectation that that's why that work is called formative work, and you'll be reassessed on it later.
Yeah, great point, because the formatives are building, right? When you get to the summative, all of you should actually feel pretty confident because you've had all these practices along the way. And I know we don't always feel like that, right, as students. But if we've had the right practice, then the formative should be like, yeah, I got this. And what I didn't get before, I can now show now. So that formative that counted, again, if I did better on the summative, I don't have to use that as a teacher anymore. I can look at what you can do now. Okay? Tony.
Sorry, I had a question about the way Schoology calculates the mastery.
Yes.
Are we allowed to have more information about how?
Yes, it's a great question. So on one of those slides, when I showed you when you go into your grade book, you can see an overall proficiency, right, for each of your measurement topics and for each of your reporting categories. Schoology averages. We don't average as a school because I've just told everybody that we don't look at early learning, okay? It does average. So what will happen is teachers at the quarter will take each student and they will look at what their overall proficiency is for each reporting category and each measurement topic. They'll look at all of the learning data and they will use a professional judgment best fit to override the proficiency you're seeing. So if your teacher felt that that was not correct because this later learning showed you can do it, they can change that. So that will happen at quarter and at semester. And I'll be working with the teachers that you need to, as students, need to be a part of that, right? So I imagine at quarter you'll be sitting, looking at all your learning data and going, oh, my writing says I'm developing, but on the last 4 pieces, I was actually exhibiting. Ms. Wheatley, I think the average is actually not accurate here. I actually think I'm exhibiting. What do you think? Then you have a conversation with Ms. Wheatley, and she's like, absolutely, and now she can change your overall proficiency to what it should be. Okay? But it's only going to happen at the quarter and the semester. The reason for that is we need enough evidence for that to make sense. Okay?
What about Schoology quizzes? Like
Schoology quizzes and Schoology discussions aren't graded, so teachers have to use that as formative, not counting assignments, or they have to set grade boundaries and say if let's say the quiz was out of 20, anything between 17 out of 20 is exhibiting depth, and anything out of 12 to 15 is this. So they can do that, but it won't calculate automatically. Yeah. Anything else? What's really important to me is I'm going to be working with Stephen Mao, your Senator for Academics, okay? And he is going to be announcing the need for a focus group. We're looking for 3 students from each grade level that we will meet with once every 2 weeks for semester 1 to get feedback about how this is going. Because we want to hear from you, just like we did in the pilot. And if things are frustrating for you, then we want to make adjustments, okay? Because this is new for your teachers as well. We're all kind of in this together. But the point is, as students, at the end of the year, my hope is you could say, Mrs. Bennett, I understand how this grade book is actually much more powerful for me as a learner than the one we had before. And if it's not, then we need to make adjustments, okay? So student voice does matter along the way. Will this completely go away? No, this is where we're at. We feel it's much better than the older system. Some of you that are new to HKIS may have had similar systems in other international schools. This is not new. Actually, we're probably one of the later schools to actually come into this kind of world of better feedback for students, okay? I hope you'll feel the grading is transparent. A lot of the feedback I've received from parents and students has they felt frustrated at the end of the semester because they didn't know how they got that letter grade that they did. So this is an effort to be much more transparent so that you know all the time where you stand. Okay, that's really the goal here. Okay, so with that, you get to go back to class. Any questions along the way, come ask me, come talk to your teachers, and I look forward to the feedback as we go through.